There are people out there who say Windows is objectively better than Mac OS. They're wrong. Hey everyone, my name is Aidan Walls, and today I'm going to talk about Mac versus PC for video editing specifically. I recently switched from my MacBook Pro, an old MacBook Pro, and I had a custom Ryzen machine built specifically for video editing, and I've been using Premiere Pro on it, so I've switched from Mac to Windows and from Final Cut Pro 10 to Premiere Pro. The thing is, we can't get into the Final Cut versus Premiere debate without talking about Mac versus PC. Historically, Windows has always been quite unreliable in comparison to Mac, but in the olden days, because of Steve Jobs and reasons, there were major compatibilities with Mac, and so Windows pretty much took over the world. But Apple were playing the long game, and they were specifically interested in meshing hardware with software. And this to date is still Apple's greatest achievement and greatest strength. I mean, I have the iPad Pro and I use it for pretty much everything, and the seamless integration that you feel when using the iPad Pro as opposed to picking up an Android device or even a Windows tablet, it just feels more put together, whereas those devices feel like a device with software put on top of it. Windows, historically, however unreliable, was always very open, so people could write their own software for it, industries could make industry-specific software for it, and people really liked Windows for that reason. And then there's price. Apple have always been more expensive. In South Africa, Apple was a no-go for many, many years, and eventually the rand strengthened and it became quite popular over here. But in recent times, I'm feeling like Mac is just getting unbearably expensive. My argument always was, with Apple, you get what you pay for. You pay extra, but you get extra, and it's a great machine. But that debate is starting to get less and less valid as time goes by. But Aidan, I hear you say, Windows computers are so badly made. This is not the case anymore. Laptops for Windows have become so well executed. The factories have become so streamlined that they've become cheaper often than a desktop computer. And because of that, they're just getting better and better in terms of their manufacturing process. And many of the brand names like Lenovo, Asus, Acer, HP, all those guys are making incredible devices. Check out the ZenBook, just amazing laptops. And so the debate of Apple is made better, Apple still is made better, but it's not as much of a debate as it used to be. Just as an example, we have a little reception laptop at my wife's practice. It's a cheapo Windows laptop. It's been sitting there for years. We only recently just replaced the battery. When it first arrived, it did admittedly ship with RAM that was unable to run Windows, so we had to put in RAM at the beginning of buying the laptop, which was just ridiculous. But apart from that, it's been a very reliable device. Also, the other thing is the PC component industry is highly competitive. Intel versus Ryzen is just a very exciting industry to be in. Well, not to be in, but to watch right now. And the gaming community is so demanding and so fussy that components for Windows computers are just getting better and better and more reliable. I mean, the components you buy now are just streets ahead of the components that were in my friend's Pentium machine in 1995. So why did I start this video by claiming that Mac is objectively better? Well, here's the thing. Windows 10 is actually great. It's relatively stable, it's easy to use. However, it's the endless tinkering that just drives me mental. It took me days to set up the audio on my Windows machine. I've had to reinstall, uninstall drivers to get certain things working on the computer. Every single time I make a change, I have to restart the computer. Admittedly, I'm a Mac user and I'm really used to that reliability of Mac just working no matter what you do. But therein lies the proof of what I'm trying to say, is that Mac OS is just objectively better. It's easier to use, it's more stable, the apps are better integrated. Apple approve all the apps that you use on it. It's just a better platform. And then with Mac, there's the issue of the R&D, the research and development that goes into integrating software with hardware. They are developing hardware components for their devices to work with their software. It's such a integrated process, and that can take months and even years for Apple to develop. Whereas with Windows, you're choosing components that are pretty much set up for Windows, but they don't know what you're going to run on that machine, and then you buy it and you take it home. And the integration part is left to you to figure out. So that whole months to years development process that Apple do is non-existent with a Windows machine, unless you maybe go for something like a Microsoft Surface or something like that, where the company has actually developed the product for Windows. And I suppose the laptops are getting like that and all that, but in the end, Apple are the best at that. So I bought a Windows machine, and straight off the bat, I had a bunch of issues to deal with. Problems with the audio, which took me ages to fix to get it running with my speakers and with no noise. Figuring out which USB ports do what, which are faster, which are slower, just frustrations. I wouldn't say frustrations, but it's nice to have an Apple product where you just plug and play, you know? Setting up my external Wi-Fi receiver. You see things that you don't even think of with a Mac. I had to plug in an external Wi-Fi receiver, get it set up, get it running properly, and even now, regularly I have to pull that little Wi-Fi receiver out, plug it back in because it's caused my computer to freeze. Literally sprinting down the main street of my town just before lockdown to get an HDMI cable because it didn't come in the box with either the computer or the screen, which is stuff that you would never have to think of with a Mac machine. Almost forgetting as a photographer and a videographer that I need a card reader for my machine, so I nearly hit lockdown without even being able to read SD cards, which would have been such a pain in the ass. And then just restarts of the machine for absolutely no reason whatsoever. And Windows users, my friends, are like, there must be something wrong with your machine, there must be something wrong with your machine, but the reality is there's something wrong with my expectation because I've been using Mac for like 8 years. And then, this is nitpicking, but this is just things that you don't think of when you've been using Mac for so long, is I hate the hardware. It's ugly. Like, everything is aimed towards the gaming market, and it's just all disgusting. And so none of the stuff that I see people like Sarah Dietschy using, none of that stuff was available to me, you know, like nice Windows components that look cool. I just had to go with a very kitsch looking Windows machine. And although the salesman said to me, these gaming keyboards are super cool, it's noisy. Just remember, I came from a MacBook Pro and an iPad Pro. I was using those on a daily basis, so I was used to flawless performance. I mean, to give you an example, my MacBook Pro is old. I'll put the specs of it on the screen now, but it's an old MacBook Pro. I've been using, through the lockdown, I've been using my Windows machine. Jacques has recently come back to work, and that thing is just so much smoother than my Windows machine. My Windows machine jumps and starts and does all sorts of weird things, and it's much, much faster. So, but then Aiden, I hear you say, why on earth did you buy a PC if you're such a Mac fan? So here's where the whole discussion gets very interesting, and if you're a Windows user and you're still with me and you haven't got completely pissed off, it's about to get interesting. So here are the positives of Windows as I see it as someone who switched back to Windows after years and years of Mac use. So my understanding was, as a Mac user, you're paying for all that cool stuff, but at the same time a Mac is so well optimized that to get the level of performance I'm looking for video editing, I will end up spending the same, if not more, on a Windows machine. This is not necessarily true because Macs have become incredibly expensive in recent times. A lot of guys have switched from their MacBook Pros to Windows for price and for other various issues. And I feel like Mac have maybe relied a little bit too much on the optimization of their machines, so they've become lazy on the performance of their hardware, so they've become so good at integrating it that they are leaving out things like dedicated GPUs on their machines. It's just, I feel like maybe there's a bit of that going. I mean, To give you an example, there's an iMac that I was looking at, which is the cheapest iMac, and the salesperson said to me, we don't sell those iMacs because they don't perform very well. So it's strange how things have developed. So I'm going to put the specs of my Ryzen machine that I had built. I did a lot of research. I'll try and find a link to the guy who gave me most of the advice for this machine on YouTube. So those are the specs of this machine. If I had to get the equivalent machine for Mac, it would be about 40 to 50,000 Rand. And the thing is, I need to invest extra in the Mac because it's not super upgradable. That's the other thing. So that leads me to my next point, is that, so for long term, my Mac computers and stuff are starting to age. We've got 2 iMacs and my MacBook Pro, and they're all starting to age and they are completely not upgradable. I got that specific MacBook Pro because I could upgrade the hard drive to an SSD and I could upgrade the RAM. I can't upgrade the CPU or anything. It's kind of as it is, and the same with the iMacs. So I can't really upgrade those machines, so they're reaching the end of their lifespan. If they were Windows machines, I could replace the CPU, I could even replace the motherboard. Maybe it would cost quite a bit of money, but I would be able to extend the life of those machines much better. Now, when you talk about a power user, you know, I've got specific cameras that I have now, but if my business grows and I decide to get a cinema camera, my storage, my CPU, everything needs to go up. I have that capacity in this machine, whereas if I bought an iMac, I would be pretty much set with what I've got, and if the machine can't work with the new codecs or whatever, I can't change it. I'm fixed. I'd have to sell the iMac and get a Windows machine. So rather play it safe on my side and just get a Windows machine that's super customizable. And then lastly, the other positive about Windows against Mac is that, remember I mentioned the Wi-Fi unit that I have to unplug and plug in? That's also a major benefit of using Windows, is that if my Wi-Fi blows, for instance, my wife's iMac, the Wi-Fi isn't working, she now has to take it in and it's probably going to cost us a small fortune to get fixed. If my Wi-Fi busts, I just unplug it and go buy a new one, and it's fairly inexpensive. Those little things over the years add up to a fair amount of money. I mean, if my SD card reader breaks on my iMac, which my iMacs are pretty reliable, but if it breaks, it's a huge expense, whereas I just unplug the SD card reader from my Windows machine and I go buy another one. That is a huge benefit of going Windows. So with all of that being said, after using the Windows machine through this lockdown period and pretty much hated the first 2 weeks, I thought I'd made a massive mistake. I thought I'd just, you know, wasted my money, and I was like, maybe I should have just saved and got an iMac. Over time, and as sort of the benefits have sort of come to me as I've used it, I've really started to love my little Windows machine, or big Windows machine. So let's conclude this video with some buyer's advice. So if you're not a super techie person and you want a computer that can pretty much do everything, you want to edit some videos for your family, you want to be able to do Word documents, you want to be able to surf the web, you want to manage the photos from your phone, all that kind of stuff, I still think Mac is the way to go. I think if you just got yourself a little MacBook Air, it's so pretty, it's so easy to use. I know the dongle issue with the USB-C is maybe a pain, but overall, it's just a lovely machine, and still, I do believe they are the best built machines. And so if you want something to last you for years and years, probably still go for Mac. But if you're the sort of person that likes to firstly save money, who doesn't mind Googling how to fix their Wi-Fi units, or how to switch off the ugly lights on your computer, or switch it from blue to yellow to red or whatever. If you don't mind that kind of thing, Windows is definitely for you, because it's cheaper and it's just far more versatile. And long term, if you build one of these machines, you can upgrade it as you go. So if you're a small-time photographer, but you think maybe in a few years I'm actually going to do this professionally, maybe a Windows is the way to go, because then you won't get into the trouble if you buy a MacBook Air and suddenly all your raw files are just slowing your computer down. So in the next video, I'll share the Premiere Pro debate, but this was my video person's perspective on Windows versus Mac. And spoiler alerts, in the Premiere versus Final Cut Pro video, I'm pretty much going to say that I still prefer Final Cut Pro. I went after the lockdown, sat down at the MacBook Pro, and working in 4K on such a slow machine, no issues, smooth as anything, and my computer still kind of stops and starts, and even though overall it is faster and handles certain things better, I do prefer Final Cut Pro. Anyway, I hope this video was useful to you. I hope you can take something away from it. Start an argument with me in the comments if you dislike this video, and I'll see you in the next one.